Getting started in Cinema 4D. Let's check it out. Okay, here we are in Cinema 4D, and in this first tutorial we're just going to go over some of the user interface and the basics of moving around in Cinema 4D. But before we get to that, let's first decide on your color scheme, whether you want to work in the light or dark. Alright, so right now I'm working in the dark color scheme, but if you want to change that to the lighter one, go up to the very top left where it says Cinema 4D, select that and choose Preferences. You're going to get the dialog box of the preferences show up, and the very top one says Interface, and the second option after Language says Scheme. You have the dark or you have the light one. Okay, I'm going to stay working in the dark one, and that's the one that I prefer to work with, but many people like to use the light one. Alright, let's just go around and look at what we have to work with here. You have some tool icons at the top and the left. Now the ones on the left is mainly when you're doing 3D modeling, so we'll get to that in another video. The ones at the top, have some basic controls over movement, your X, Y, Z coordinates, and you have some render settings, and then of course when you're adding your objects. Now over to your top right, this is your object manager. So when you start adding objects to work with, like let me add a cube here, and I'm going to add, say I'll add a polygon. You'll see that it starts listing them in the top right, and you can select them and it'll highlight in yellow the one that you have selected. Now the bottom right, this is your attribute manager. So when you have an object selected, you'll see that it shows you the attributes to that object. So right here, there's the object. Here is the coordinates, and there's some basics. Like that is a cube under the name, and if I was to switch to the polygon, you see there's the polygon. Okay, at the bottom you're going to have your coordinates manager, and you can see you have position, size, and rotation, and this is where the coordinates of your object. Right above that is the timeline. So when you start animating and adding keyframes, this is your timeline manager. And below that, that blank area is your materials manager. This is where you will add colors and textures. You can hit create right here to add new materials, or if you just double click, it will add a blank material. And you'll see over there to the right, there's the material where you can add different colors. You can also double click on the material and it will pull up the material editor, which we'll get to that in a different video. And the last thing is the big window right there in the middle of the user interface, and that is your viewport. That's what lets you see all your objects and lets you move around and add cameras and lights and does everything where you're working in Cinema 4D. Now next we're going to move on and we're going to do some actual moving around in the viewport and the different perspectives that you can look at. Okay, so when we're viewing an object, and right now I'm just looking at the cube, I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of the polygon that I had and only stay with the cube. We're in perspective view right now. If you look right up here at the top of your viewport right here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different icons. The very first one, if you click and hold, it's going to move you left to right. If you move to the next one, this is going to do like a dolly in and dolly out. Now, remember, we're not moving the object. We're not moving the cube at all. We're just moving our perspective of how we see the cube. And then the third one is the rotation. Now, this is our view of how we're seeing it. We're rotating around. Okay? Now, the last one, if you click on that, what's going to happen is you're going to see that you have 4 different viewpoints. So let's look at the top left is perspective. The top right is the top view. So we're looking down at the top of the cube. The bottom left is the right view, and then the bottom right is the front view. Now, if you click any of these views, and you can see at the top right, they all have the exact same controls as when we just had one window open. So if I was to click here, I can move, I can do dolly in and dolly out, I can do rotate, and we're only looking through that perspective. In this example, I'm looking at the front perspective. Now, if I want to go full screen in that one window, you have this button at the top right. Click that, and now I am full screen in the front. Okay, I can click that again, and I go back to 4. I can go back to perspective views, which was the view that you work in most often. And then now we're back in perspective view with just one window. Now, another thing that I want to let you know is sometimes when you're viewing something, like say I'm viewing this, I'm going to dolly out to where it's really far away, and I'm going to rotate, click and rotate, and I'm looking at it from the bottom. and it's really messed up of how my perspective view is. In order to get back to default perspective, go over here to the top left, you'll see View, and if you go down where it says Frame Default, it puts you right back at the default view. Okay, so that's View, Frame, Default. Now the controls that you had right here where you have to click and hold in order to move left and right, click that one in order to dolly in or out, there's also keyboard shortcuts to do that. And so right now if I was to click in this blank area, not on the object but just outside in this gray area, nothing happens. But if I hold down the 1 on my keyboard and then click and hold, I'm going to move left and right. If I hold down 2, I'm going to dolly in and dolly out. If I hold down 3, now I'm going to rotate. Now that is just moving around in the perspective view. Now we're going to go into actually some controls of moving the object around. Okay, so let's start moving the cube. So if you don't have a cube on your screen, right up here at the top right, you see there's a cube. Just click it and it'll drop one into your viewport there. Now make sure that you highlight the cube. Now you can either click it on the viewport, or if you come up to your object manager, you can click on the word cube. Now also I want you to pay attention to right here, the attribute manager, have it on coordinates, which is the second tab. So have it on coordinates and then have the cube selected. Now let me zoom in real quick a little bit here. And what you see is you have 3 arrows I want to work with. You have a green arrow, blue, and red. These are your X, Y, Z coordinates, or this is how you move in X, Y, Z space. And if you ever forget which arrow represents what, at the bottom left of your viewport down here, they always have this little kind of icon that shows you Y is going up, Z is in Z space or Z space, and X is the red. So if you ever forget which one's which, there's a little icon to help you out. Now, I want to first grab the green, which is the Y, and if you just click, and you can hover your mouse over the arrow, you can see that it highlights where you can click it, and you can move the cube up. Now pay attention to what happens over here in your coordinates. Under position, you can see that X is still at 0, and Z is at 0, but we moved in Y space, and we moved it up 202 centimeters. All right, so you can see that you moved Y. Now we're actually physically moving the cube. We're not just moving our perspective. Now you can grab the red arrow and you can move it, and now you can look at the coordinates, and X and Y both have changed with their coordinates. And then you can move the blue in Z space, and you can see that now all 3, X, Y, and Z, has changed in the position. All right, so whenever you have an object and you want to click and drag just the arrows, that's probably the easiest way to do that. But you also have controls over X, Y, and Z at the very top. Right here is my move tool. If I was to click outside of, as long as I have the move tool selected, if I was to click, you can see that I can move just by clicking and holding anywhere in the gray space, because my object is highlighted. I can move X, Y, and Z all over the place. Now, if I want to lock this down and only move in one particular area, these blue X, Y, and Z at the top, if you click on them, they become gray. That means you locked it down or you deactivated it. So I'm going to lock down X and Z and only leave Y. So if I click and hold out here in the gray area, it only allows me to move in Y space. No matter if I move left, right, or any which way, it will only let me move up and down or in Y. Now the only way to override that is to come over here and physically click the blue or red arrow, and then it will let you move. But just using the blank area, if you turn all 3 on, it lets you move in any direction that you want, or you can lock them down and you can only move one way or another when clicking outside of the object. Okay, just a couple more things and that would be the end of this particular tutorial. I'm going to turn back on X, Y, and Z. I'm going to make sure that I have my cube highlighted. Now, next to the move tool here at the top left, to the right of that you have scale, and to the right of scale you have rotate. So if I select scale and come down here and just move anywhere, I don't have to click on the object, I'm just clicking and holding right outside the gray area, I'm actually scaling the cube up or down. If I come here and click the rotate, I can click outside and rotate. You can also click on the blue, red, and green. And here you are rotating. And now we're rotating the object, or we can scale the object. And when you click on scale, you can see it turns to, instead of an arrow, it turns into a block. All right, and that's scaling the object up or down in X, Y, or Z. All right, now the last thing I want to show you, let me go back to just the regular move tool, select the cube, and here is our coordinates. And you can see that we've moved our coordinates right over here. Our position is all over the place. If you ever want to reset, if you just double click or you just highlight all the numbers and zero it out. So I'm going to put 0, 0, and then I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, 0. And you can see I put everything back to 0, and it set the position back, but over here to the right, the rotation is still off. So you can hit 0, 0, 0, and 0, and now we set the rotation and the position back to 0. All right, that's it. That's all we're going to do in this video. This is just a quick run through of the user interface, some movements in the viewport with our perspective view, and a little bit of basic movements when you have your object selected. Thanks for watching.